In case you haven't noticed, we've been doing a lot of changing things around in here. So it's only natural that a cord wouldn't get plugged in properly or something. But I just want to say a big thank you to our team that has done this transition. Jasmine, Steven, tell me who else, Jim, Justin, Maddie, who is not here, but Maddie Mills from Verbatim Church did a huge help in transitioning a lot of stuff. I'm probably forgetting some other, Greg, Keith, who else am I forgetting? Thank you for doing the transition. Thank you for making the cords. I know Justin was up in the rafters putting cords up. Maddie was up in the rafters doing cords. I know people were on the ground doing cords. Many, many, many cords. So thank you. There's a lot of hidden things that happen that make a community happen. And a lot of you do different things at different times in different ways. And you probably don't get thank yous enough because you're doing the secret, hidden thing, whether anyone's watching or not. But God sees. And I try to see. So thank you. I really appreciate you. Not one person could do everything. It just is not possible. So, hey, you guys know Jesus, right? There's so many different versions of Jesus out there. There's so many different ones. I think we met the real Jesus this morning while we were worshiping, the resurrection-powered Jesus, the one who was able, Jesus, the one who sees us exactly where we are in every single circumstance, the one who has resurrection life, who shows up, who calms the storm, who speaks peace. He might even sleep in the middle of the storm because he's not riled up. Jesus is is free of anxiety. As a person who has struggled their whole life with anxiety, and it's not the kind that's like capturing your thoughts kind of anxiety. It's just like a physical thing that comes on me. I've tried to cast the demon out a million times. It's the way I'm wired. It is part of what makes me great. It's my strength and my weakness. I get really wound tight. Jesus has none of that. Let's all just breathe that in for just a moment. He has no rival. He's perfection. He's everything. He's not just like everything you ever wanted in a guy, but he is. He literally is. He's not like the Jesus of our own making. But if you could write a list of all the qualities that you find good, you'd find those all in Jesus. And sometimes I feel like our experience of God, Jesus, the Father, the Spirit, it's so jaded by our worldview. It's so jaded by our life experience. And we put things on Jesus that he's not wearing. We put things on God that he's not doing. This week at the table, we heard some things. And I think it was hard for a lot of us to hear because of the statistic that Danny shared. 75% of believers or people, 75%, do not have the revelation of the goodness of God. 75%. I'm going to bet that some of that 75% is in this room today. It's just math. And I'm not good at math. But I'm good enough at it to know that some of us in this room don't have the full revelation of the goodness of God. Some of us who have been Christians for a really long time still don't have the revelation of the goodness of God. And it shapes the way that we interact with people, and it shapes the way that we interact with God. Our expectation, like, for someone who doesn't know how good God is, some of the things that Karen was saying this morning could be offensive. Or just like, move on, please. You haven't moved me with your experience of who God is. I have not experienced this revelation that you're experiencing. I haven't experienced this resurrection life on the inside of me. When I'm in the midst of hardship, I just still lay there in the gutter. Nothing has changed. Well, that's not on God. But it does shape the way that we relate to God. So that's not my message today. But I think it's so important that we recognize, even if we've been believers for a really long time, we still have aspects of who God is that we are going to keep learning and growing in. Guess what? For eternity, we will not hit the limit of who God is. Our revelation of God will go on and on and on throughout eternity. And if that sounds boring to you, I'm so sorry. But I can't wait until that veil is removed. I can't wait until that mirror is not dim anymore and I get to see the full reflection, the full image, the full enchilada of who God is, and I fall on my face and I worship him. But then I have to get up because I got to see another glimpse. I've got to see another glimpse of this God whose revelation knows no limits, knows no ends. Are you excited for that? Because I can't wait. I will wait. I am happy to be here. But that's going to be awesome. And our revelation of who Jesus is, there's some things that are unchanging, and then there's just some things that we have not experienced yet. And we don't want to limit our theology of who God is to our experience, because we will miss out. I'm just going to read something. Why don't you just close your eyes? I'm just going to read something to you this morning. I'm going to do a lot of reading. You don't need to see the screen. Just close your eyes. If I were to speak with eloquence in earth's many languages and in the heavenly tongues of angels, yet I didn't express myself with love, my words would be reduced to the hollow sound of nothing more than a clanging cymbal. And if I were to have the gift of prophecy with a profound understanding of God's hidden secrets, and if I possessed unending supernatural knowledge, and if I had the greatest gift of faith that could move mountains, but have never learned to love, then I am nothing. And if I were so generous as to give away everything I own to feed the poor and to offer my body to be burned as a martyr, without the pure motive of love, I would gain nothing of value. Love is large and incredibly patient. Love is gentle and consistently kind to all. It refuses to be jealous when blessing comes to someone else. Love does not brag about one's achievements, nor inflate its own importance. Love does not traffic in shame and disrespect, nor selfishly seek its own honor. Love is not easily irritated or quick to take offense. Love joyfully celebrates honesty and finds no delight in what is wrong. Love is a safe place of shelter, for it never stops believing the best for others. And love never takes failure as a defeat, for it never gives up. Keeps going. The end of this says, "For now we see but a faint reflection of riddles and mysteries as though reflected in a mirror." It's that thing I was just talking about. We haven't seen the full revelation yet. But one day we will see face to face. My understanding is incomplete now, but one day I will understand everything, just as everything about me has been fully understood. And until then, there are three things that remain: faith, hope, and love. Yet love surpasses them all. So I say to you, above all else, let love be the beautiful prize for which you run. We've heard that a bajillion times, and it never gets old to me. Love never traffics in shame or disrespect. I love that line. This is the Passion Translation. Doesn't manipulate people to get them to behave the way that they ought to. Love is actually enough. According to this scripture, love is actually enough to do the work that God intended it for. And I know that I'm not fully here in 1 Corinthians 13. I have not landed on this totally. I really, really want to. Does anyone else really, really want to? I want relationships that flow like that. I want to minister out of that understanding. And honestly, I'm not going to talk about Africa today, but there was something that happened in me when I was in Africa that I feel like I kind of stepped into that in a way that I haven't been able to fully here. Like I told you guys last week, I thought I had a really big capacity to love. It wasn't something I was like proud of or bragging about. I just felt like it's not hard for me. It's not hard for me to love you. It's the love of God in me. I love you. But I actually can recognize there are limits. I have made limits. And I'm not saying that boundaries are bad. Boundaries aren't bad. There's some times where my love has been poured out. And, we've experienced that as a church body where we've restored people. It was love that motivated us to restore. And it didn't have its work the way we dreamed it would. And it was painful. And this last week, we talked about honor in our leadership class. It was very triggering, to say the least. Like, very triggering. Did you know that if we're triggered, it doesn't mean that it's wrong, what's being said to us? In fact, if we're triggered, there's probably a lot more there than we're willing to, and I'm not saying this as a passive-aggressive swipe at anyone. I'm talking to myself, friends. I am talking to myself. I want to talk about the kind of love that Jesus has this morning. And maybe I should have saved this for Easter, but I feel like I have a correction for the body this morning. Please hear it with love and grace. And I'm talking to myself. I am wrestling this myself. We're in this together, but I do feel like I have something that needs to be shared before Easter. And it's about this: who is Jesus? Like when we preach the gospel, we actually need to preach the gospel of Jesus. The full thing, even when it offends us. Honestly, the gospel is offensive. It is too good to be true, but it is true. That's the crazy thing about it. I remember it was in 2008. I was sitting in my office now. It was my dad's office at the time. And we were having a staff meeting, and we were talking about grace. And I got in a literal fight. Like, stormed out of the room, slammed the door, left the church building. I'm not proud of that because I was so triggered by what I now understand is the truth. The truth confronted me in the face, and it was so offensive to me that Mike Sally would be that audacious, that careless, that reckless with his perception of who God was, that he would actually teach that. It was dangerous because people were going to fall into sin. And they would use that teaching to fall into sin, and I was pissed. That's the right word. I whispered it because we're in church. But I was. How dare you You are careless. You're reckless. This is wrong. You are going to send people to hell. They need to know the truth, that their sin will cause them to end up in hell. I was so mad. How dare you, Mike Sally? I thought you were my friend and my brother, but clearly you do not know God. And I can't believe that my dad hired you. And I'm leaving. I don't want to be a part of this. My friends will go to hell because of what you're teaching. I was that wound up. And you know what? I had people in my life that were falling away from the Lord. And my reaction was fear-based. It was my own anxiety. It wasn't God's. And I had the good sense to come back in and apologize and say, you know what? I actually don't know anything about grace. I have a religious spirit. I did. And I was like, I recognize that what I am reacting to right now is years, not something my parents taught me, but years of a system that I immersed myself in and said, this is the way. And I had it done to me. I was punished regularly with the Word of God. I was held accountable for my every misleading thought. I was held accountable for my skirt being possibly too short. I was held accountable because a boy smacked me on the butt at school and the teacher did not punish him. I got Saturday school because I must have had a seductive spirit. Listen, this is what religion does. Some male teacher who probably dealt with lust himself said, I'm going to punish her because she has something that I can't control. As a 7th grader. What the heck? Okay, so this shaped my worldview. This shaped my perception of God. But you know what? It wasn't true. And I want to tell you, there's some things that were sitting in the seat this morning. I'm going to offend you today, and I'm not going to offend you on purpose. I don't want to offend you. I actually want you to love me. I want you to like me and think, man, she's got a good understanding of the word. But I know some of you are going to leave here today and go, that girl is woke. That girl is woke. And you might feel like I felt that day with Mike Sally and slam the door and never return. But I'm going to tell you, that is not my problem. And that's not God's problem. We need to get our hearts connected to the real Jesus. And I'm not saying that I have the full understanding, but I want to tell you something. I am so provoked by this. I've been sitting on this for weeks. Did you say old lady? Okay. Woke lady, woke lady, woke lady. I thought he said old. I honestly would rather be old than woke. Or both. I'm going to get a tissue because I'm going to cry today. It's going to happen. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. I have my very own box of tissues. That's hilarious. Thanks, Jazz. Okay. I've been sitting on this for a while. So, I was going to do this different, but I'm going to do it this way. A year ago, I preached out of John 13. And I felt super compelled. Like, this is the way of love. This is the model of Jesus. This is the last thing he did with his disciples. This was the last action he did with his disciples before he gave a series of messages and went to the cross. And this was his last moment to display something and show his heart and say, now do this. And we all know it's the washing of the feet, and I'm going to go there, I'm going to read that. But a year ago, I taught out of this. I'm going to teach out of it again. You say, why would you do this again? A year ago, almost to the day, like one day different, on the Super Bowl, I preached this message. A year later, at the Super Bowl, this thing became a firestorm of conversation and controversy. The act of Jesus washing the feet of people. And I have just been carrying this burden ever since this firestorm came. So, friends, I want us to open John 13 this morning, and I want us to just actually look at it. Jesus knew that the night before Passover would be his last night on earth. His last night on earth before leaving this world to return to the Father's side. All throughout his time with his disciples, Jesus had demonstrated a deep and tender love for them. And now he longed to show them the full measure of his love. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. He longed to show them the full measure of his love. Now, he wanted to show his disciples the full measure of his love. For them, yes. But it doesn't say only them. Note that, please. Before the evening meal had begun, the accuser had already planted betrayal into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And Jesus was fully aware that the Father had placed all things under his control, for he had come from God, and he was about to go back to be with him. So he got up from the meal, he took off his outer robe, and took a towel and wrapped it around his waist. He then poured water in a basin and began to wash the disciples' dirty feet and dry them with his towel. He does all these things. You guys know this story. We've taught out of this for a long time. Peter argues with the Lord. I cannot let you wash my feet. Jesus says, you don't understand the full meaning of what I'm doing, but soon it will be clear. Peter says, you will never wash my feet. And then he says, Peter, if you don't allow me to wash your feet, you can't share in my life. So then Peter says the thing, then wash me everywhere, head to toe. Then Jesus, he says, you need to have your feet, you've been completely washed. You just need your feet to be cleansed. That can't be said for all of you. And he looks at Judas because he knows he's going to betray him. After washing their feet, he put his robe back on and returned to his place at the table. Do you understand what I just did? Jesus said. You've called me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for that's who I am. So if I'm your teacher and your Lord and have just washed your dirty feet, then you should follow the example that I've set for you and wash one another's dirty feet. Now do for each other what I have done for you. I speak to you this timeless truth. A servant is not superior to his master, and an apostle is never greater than the one who sent him. So now put into practice what I have done for you, and you will experience a life of happiness enriched with untold blessings. Okay, so the significance of Jesus washing the disciples' feet is clear. It's clear to me. He's modeling the heart of servant leadership, 100%. But he's also doing a lot more than that. In Hebrew culture, it was customary when you had a guest at the table that you wash their feet. It wasn't just for special spiritual scholars. It was whoever came through your door. That was the custom. Jesus washing the feet was the radical thing, not the feet being washed. And Jesus did the audacious thing because the person who was supposed to wash these nasty feet was like a teenage servant girl, someone with no clout, someone with no standard or standing in society. They were a servant for sure, and likely the lowest of the servants of the house. There is exception when a rabbi and his students are together, that it's customary that the students would wash the feet of the rabbi. And in doing so, they would put on a special cloak. You can find this out if you dig into church history and biblical history. The students of the rabbi would put on a special cloak that would signify, I'm not a servant, I'm a student. Because the very act of washing someone's feet was the lowest thing you could do. So it wasn't normal for Jesus, the rabbi, Jesus, the teacher, Jesus, the guest of honor, Jesus, to take off his robe that signifies his position. He took it off. He didn't put on a student's robe. He had just his garment, his lowly, vulnerable garment, and he wrapped himself in a towel. He's abolishing hierarchy right here. And he's abolishing status and cultural norms. Because that's what Jesus does. And he's making a statement. I don't care who you think I am. And I don't care who you are. This is the full measure of my love for you, is to give all of myself, and what I'm about to do is the greatest thing I could ever show you. But this is next in line. I think this is radical. Jesus is a radical guy. So he's saying it doesn't matter what you think of me. And it doesn't matter whose feet I'm washing. We are hearing about the disciples because this is what Jesus wanted to speak to them and teach to them, but not because it's reserved for disciples only. I just want to clarify that. There's been a lot of talk about it's Jesus washed the, so-and-so's feet because it's like you have to be a disciple. You have to be a follower of Jesus to have this experience. And that is not what the scripture is saying. I'm sorry, if that's what you get from it, I feel we've missed the point. Peter knows the significance of what Jesus has done, and that's why he's like, no, not happening. I can't let you demean yourself this way. I'm slamming the door. I'm leaving because if you are this audacious, Jesus, what will people think? You can't wash my feet. It was Peter's own stuff that was emerging. I don't want people to think Jesus, the guy that I finally realized is the Messiah, I don't want them to think you're less than a servant girl. I don't want this confusion. I like the hierarchy. It makes me feel safe. I know how to play in this game. Peter was freaked out. And Jesus says, unless I do this, you don't get to be part of me. This is not about a bath. And there's been a bunch of people that have posted, foot washing is not a spa treatment. You're totally right. Foot washing is not a spa treatment. But unless we experience this as disciples and as sinners, we cannot have part of him. And guess what? Jesus washed the feet of Judas, knowing full well what Judas was about to do. In fact, he looks right at him and he says, I know what's in your heart. Go do what must be done. I know. That was Nicole barfing, if you couldn't tell. No, he does. He looks right at him. And he says, I know what's in your heart. Go do what must be done. But Judas received the full expression of Jesus' love. Jesus washed Peter's feet. And hours later, he says, I didn't know the guy. Never heard of him. Never heard of him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Full denial. He washes Thomas's feet. Days later, Thomas would be like, I don't know if you're Jesus. Show me. I want to put my hand through your side. Show me your hands. I don't know if you're Jesus. I know you just walked through that wall. I'm not sure. There's a whole bunch of symbolism in Jesus asking the disciples to remove their sandals so that he could wash their feet. By removing their sandals, there is something of inheritance and grace that Jesus wanted to show his disciples. And this beautiful moment before he goes to the cross at this Last Supper, he's teaching them, I believe he's teaching them something about how to minister moving forward. By removing their sandals and washing their feet, Jesus is showing them that he's granting them a new inheritance, his own inheritance. That was a symbol often used in covenants of inheritance in Jewish culture. Take off your shoe. We're going to trade shoes. Take off your shoe. We're going to dip our feet in the water. That was part of signifying Hebrew culture, inheritance, and covenant. You can see this in different places in Scripture. But Jesus is saying every defilement will be removed so that you can place the soles of your feet upon the new covenant of inheritance. In Exodus, he says, don't draw near to this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for where you stand is holy ground. And in Joshua, he says, every place that the sole of your feet will tread, I've given to you, as I said it to Moses. In the book of Ruth, he shows significance and redemption by removing sandals. Boaz paid for the full redemption of Ruth's family, her family name, her whole lineage. Her inheritance was restored through the covenant of marriage between her and Boaz. And part of that was taking off the shoe and having bare feet. And all of these things that I'm talking about are things that cannot be earned. It's actually a work of grace. This grace that is so offensive to me makes it possible. Jesus himself is the embodiment of grace. He is grace. Jesus is grace. And him washing the feet of those he taught was not only uncomfortable, but as I said before, it was upside down to their culture. And he was saying, you cannot wash yourself. You cannot wash yourself. And as I'm doing this for you, go and do this for others. You can't make yourself holy. You can't purify your own life on your own. You can't take new ground without my authority working in and through you. You can't be holy unless you embrace my holiness. This is way more than about good hygiene. This is way more than cultural practices. This is about our understanding of redemption, restoration, implementing the kingdom culture of humility, service, generosity, giving yourself away, laying down your status. He says, do this for one another, restore one another, serve one another, live humble with one another. And remember, wherever you place your feet, you have authority to take dominion. Release this to everyone you come in contact with. And unless you embrace this, not just unless you let me wash your feet, but unless you embrace this, that this is the way. Unless you embrace the fact that not everybody will go this way. Honestly, the fact that you wash someone's feet and they might do the sin thing anyway. Jesus knew not everybody was going to make it. I just have to say, though, I saw something. It crushed me. I literally wept for hours when I read this. This is not the heart of Jesus. Jesus washed Judas's feet, and then he still sent him to hell. Friends, I don't know that anybody here, I saw it from a very well-known minister. Frankly, a well-known minister who got removed from their church and moved on to another one because they're a big, mean bully. And I'm not going to say their name, but they were abusive in their leadership. Like this, of course, this message is going to be held up and said in a different light than what Jesus meant it, because it doesn't fit their narrative. It doesn't fit the way that they want to live their life. But Jesus would never relish in the fact that Judas went to hell. And guess what? We don't know if Judas went to hell. How do we know? We make a lot of assumptions. We don't know. We can guess Judas had it coming. Guess what? Judas was also fulfilling what needed to happen. We don't know the mercy and the grace of God in the last moments. Not a single person in this room knows what happens with someone when they're about to take their last breath. And Jesus would never boast in the fact that he did not send anyone to hell. Judas's own actions may have sent himself there. But Jesus came to save Judas and all the other Judases. He came to save us. Romans 5, read the whole thing in its entirety. We should all bawl our eyes out when we read Romans 5. What grace did for us. What grace himself did for us. It is amazing. And while we were still sinners, each and every one of us were caught in darkness, maybe self-righteousness. I honestly think probably my biggest sin that I have ever done is self-righteousness. And I don't say that with a badge of honor. I wish I didn't waste years of my life being self-righteous. I didn't know I was self-righteous. I just thought I was doing the thing. I thought I was doing what God wanted. You know what? I don't sin more understanding grace. I would say I sin less because I actually understand this beautiful gift that God has given to me. I don't ever go around purposely sinning. When I'm sinning, I go, oh, I just did that. God, I just pooped on grace. I just spit in the face of grace. Forgive me, Lord, help me. My flesh just poked out. And you know what? He's faithful and just, and he forgives us of our sins. But every single one of us, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were yet to be born, knowing that we were going to choose sin, there's some of us that have done some things. And there's some of us that have had some things done to us. This is the hard one. When we were talking about honor, this is the hard thing. I'm not saying go and be their best friend. But if redemption doesn't have its full work for the worst of the worst, this is the worst conversation. I hate it. I remember we were sitting around a campfire, and literally one of my friends that loves Jesus was like, yeah, I don't want redemption to work for rapists. I just don't. And it just doesn't seem fair. And I'm like, I understand. It doesn't seem fair, especially when it's been done to you. It does not seem fair. But that's when we start qualifying what's sin, what's not sin. I mean, it just gets into a really, really dark conversation. But guess what? We should have these conversations. We should have these conversations, and often, because I think when we don't have the conversations, we get stuck in wrong thinking. And if I hadn't had that conversation with Mike Sally in 2008, I might still be stuck in self-righteousness. And I'm so thankful that he loved me enough to go, yeah, God's working on her. I'm not going to get offended. I'm just going to pray that she has a revelation of grace. But guess what? There's some stuff that has happened to us. Horrible, hard things. Redemption is still available for those yucky people. The grace of God is still available for them. It's so hard when you're like, but that's not fair, God. I know. Like, put the worst thing that you can imagine, the thing that was done to you that was so hard. And it's like, we're walking through forgiveness, and it's a process. But the grace of God still reaches those people. And Jesus would wash their feet. Now, let's just imagine, like, Bin Laden. He's a bad guy. He's a bad dude. I actually think there's a picture that somebody posted. There was like some, it wasn't the same conversation, but it was like, there's a picture of Trump, there was a picture of Biden, there was a picture of Osama bin Laden, there was a picture of like, insert whoever, and Jesus was washing their feet. That actually is the gospel. It's hard. It's too wild to understand. There are people in my life right now that I need God's grace not to run them over with my car. I'm not kidding. They did bad things to people I love. That's my honest human reaction. But when I stop in my honest human reaction and I think about the truth and who Jesus is, I go, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you, Emily? That's not who God is. And this is what I'm talking about, that thing where we let our life experience frame our perception of the goodness of God, of the character of God, how far God's reach is. That song, The Reckless Love of God, it's not just a good line. God's love is reckless in our human thinking. Like, it was what I was saying to Mike. That's dangerous stuff we're talking about. What if people sin? What if yucky people understand this? Do I have to forgive them? The answer is yes. That's not fair. But just close your eyes for 1 second and think back to a couple things that you've done. And it was the joy that was set before Jesus, that he endured the cross for you and took all that crap upon him. That just you, just me, just us in this room, it's too much. Just the sins in this room alone, those are too much for one sin-free person to bear. But then it's the whole of humanity. That's reckless behavior. It is. Thank God. Or we all would be going to hell. Literally. Not one of us. All have fallen short of the glory of God. And the wages of sin is death. We all deserve death. The judge hits the gavel and he says, death, death, death. But then he pulls the scroll of the judgment up out of the blood of Jesus, and it's blank. There is no sin there. It is paid in full. That's reckless. That is too good. That's too much grace. We need to be held accountable. That's the thing. You are held accountable. And sin is its own tormentor. And the justice of God does not look like the justice of earth. If you have been sinned against, if you have been wrongfully, treated, abused, victimized, the justice that we're looking for is earthly justice. But what God is going to release is far more beneficial and far more powerful than any penance, punishment, vindication we could ever get. We don't understand. And I love how 1 Corinthians says, we see right now in part through a very dimly lit mirror. But there is coming a day when we will see the fullness, crystal clear, and all of these things will be brought into the light. But the thing that we need to know, the only thing that we can actually take away is love. And it's not the mamby-pamby, wimpy, version of love. It's not, it's audacious. It is the most ferocious, wild love. And I think one of the things that the Lord wants to tweak within our hearts as a church is He's not afraid of our sin. He's not put off. He's not nervous at all by your behavior. He's not shocked or surprised. It doesn't mean He loves it. It doesn't mean He condones it. There's not a time when Jesus doesn't get in the dirt with people. If you go read John 8, the story of the woman who was caught in adultery, He proves this. I mean, every single time sinners are brought to Him, Jesus gets right in their space and loves them right where they are. You know what He said to that woman after He rescued her? He said, "Go and sin no more." He didn't get soft on sin. He looked Judas right in the eyes and said, "Do what you must do. I know what you're going to do. I'm not surprised by your behavior." I think sometimes we put these walls up, and can I just talk about Facebook for a second? Can we all delete our Facebook pages? Good, Kathleen. She said she doesn't have one. I mean, I have Facebook too, and now I just pretty much only just use it to put announcements about church on there. But we say things in our emotional whatever, and then it's out there, and your kids read it, and your neighbors read it, and your coworkers read it. And you know what? You might be 100% right, but you're so wrong. Because we can be right and be in the wrong spirit. Jesus was never going around doing gotcha, zinga, truth bomb, drop the mic. I mean, he did, but it was love bombs. He wasn't like, the only time he ever did that was, "You are a bunch of whitewashed tombs and hypocrites." It's the only time he turned over the tables. That was when he got rowdy. That was when his love looked ferocious and called people to the truth. It was people who were supposed to know better. And you know what? I feel like some of us will never get low enough to wash the feet of sinners because of our Facebook pages, because of the things that we say with no accountability. Some of our kids will never come talk to us about their stuff because we're not safe. Because when they share it with us, we give them a pile of scriptures and we give them a religious answer. And I'm not saying don't tell the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth all day. And you know what? Grandparents, parents, we need to be people that our kids can talk to us about anything, that their friends can talk to us about anything. We just might be the only Jesus they ever meet. I'm shocked when kids come to my house and they don't know anything about God. Nothing. They know nothing about God. I can't tell you, I didn't post things on Facebook about our trip to Africa to have anything else but kids be sponsored. That was my whole motivation. I just wanted people to know about Show Mercy. I want kids to be sponsored. I want money to go into their hands. I want to make a difference. And the only way that I knew to do that in a massive form, there's like 5,000 friends on Facebook, show the world. That was my only motivation. I've never had more of Audrey's friends come talk to me about God than I have in the last 2 weeks. Because they saw me in the dirt with people. And they were like, that's so amazing. When you were kissing that crusty old person, like literally not crusty because they're old, but like they had dirt all over them, I cried and cried. Why did you do that? Because Jesus compelled me to. I didn't think 1 second about it. After I got home, someone said to me, I was thinking, like, is she getting scabies? Does she have jiggers? Does she have lice? And I was like, I never thought of that one time, but now I am itchy. But you know what? The whole time I was there and these things are happening and we're just doing it because it's just so easy to do. It's what Jesus wants you to do. I was like, well, when's the last time I kissed a person on the street in Albany? I might get arrested. Well, it depends on how you do it. I wouldn't kiss them that way. Just on the top of the head, like the love of Jesus. Hug somebody who needs a hug. People do drugs in our windowsills. They poop right outside our door. We had a fire last week, and last night another one. Darn them. It makes me so mad because we have to clean it up. And isn't that the truth about when people sin? It makes us so mad because we think we have to clean it up somehow. And sometimes we literally do. It affects us, and we have to clean up. Is that more about what it is about? Sometimes I think it is. But we had a fire, and the embers actually came under the door and into the church, and the whole church filled with smoke. So much so that it did $3,600 worth of damage to our HVAC system because of the fire safe things shut. And it was doing its job. It thought there was a fire, so it was protecting the unit. But once those things shut, they never can be opened again. You just have to replace them. And there was 3 of them, and that's the cost. So it costs a lot for the nonsense and the mayhem that's happening outside these walls. And when it happens, I'm like, let's build a fence. Let's put some jaggedy things on the ground to keep them away. What can we do to keep these people away from our doors? I don't know. Maybe we should kiss them. I don't want to. But what if? What if we actually went out and washed their feet? Would it change their behavior? I don't know. But they might know something that they didn't know when they sat down in the dirt out there to do the drugs. When they sat down in the mess, living in the broken cycle that they're in. Maybe it would change something. Maybe it wouldn't. But it would probably change us. I know it would change me. I have a lot of thinking to do. I have a lot of changing to do. My heart is broken. And so I'm going to wrap this up. But, when the Super Bowl commercial came out, there's this commercial that came out. I think they played it 3 times. Did they miss the mark? Maybe they did. Does Jesus get us? Yeah. Is that the message that we should have spent millions of dollars to promote? I don't know. He does a lot more than gets us. He does a lot more than gets us. But the firestorm of anger that came out of the church, nationwide, I've never seen something like it. And I was grieved. Personally, I was grieved to see somebody say, Jesus washed Judas's feet and then sent him to hell, like that is our response. Because someone showed a video of Jesus washing the feet of a gay person or a trans person or outside of an abortion clinic or outside of name any sin that we deem disgusting and vile. Do we really think that Jesus wouldn't go to those places? Do we think that Jesus isn't already there? He is, he does, he will we? And their message probably did not hit the mark, but neither did ours. And church, we know better. I want to see us carry 1 Corinthians 13, where we don't traffic in shame and disrespect. You have something? Come on up. Where we keep no record of wrong, where we believe the best, where we speak the truth in love, where we do the thing where we actually could wash someone's feet, have relationship with them, and then call them to the truth. But if we never get low enough, we'll never get to have the conversation.
Since you brought my name into it.
Did I?
No, I'm just kidding. This has nothing to do with being woke or not being woke. No. Nothing to do with that. Absolutely nothing. Probably one of the most beautiful things I can ever remember that we did here when we had training for reigning is, as teachers, we would always wash the students' feet, but then beyond that, we had this one class that wanted to do something with Deb on Tuesday night with the feeding in the park, the dinners in the park. And so what it was they wanted to have violin music, prime rib, and mashed potatoes and gravy and all his vegetables, great, this amazing meal. And then buy shoes for everybody and wash everybody's feet and give them their new shoes. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. As I was going down, and I did a few people, and then I came to this guy, and all of a sudden I realized this guy's a wanted pedophile. What am I going to do? I washed his feet. I gave him new shoes, and he wept, and he wept, and he wept. He said, I didn't think anybody could ever love me. I thought everybody hated me, and that nobody would ever love me. I said, well, you're feeling love right now because God loves you. I don't know what he did after that, or the other people, but I'm just saying, this is a message that needs to be heard again and again before we become flesh and move into the neighborhood. Because this is really what this is about. If we're going to move into the neighborhood and the word's going to become flesh, then this is the message we need to hear, and somehow we need to get a hold of what does that look like to wash the feet of these people. I'm not saying go around to house to house with a bucket and water and say, can I wash your feet? I'm saying, what does it look like to be the message Jesus said to his disciples that they needed to hear before he left the planet so that they could go and win the world to him? And this is a message that we need to hear, and this is what we actually need to figure out how we're going to do again and again and again and again to show people who Jesus is.
Yes. And if you're on the struggle bus with this, Don't force it. Allow the Lord to do the work in your heart. Don't go into dark places if you don't feel strength to be able to stand in the midst of them. We need to use wisdom. If someone has hurt your family or walked out the thing that Dad was just talking about, in their life, like, I get those struggles, and I'm not trying to say don't love or forgive or be the extension of Jesus to them. Do. But I also understand that we're all in a process, and who you reach out to, who you pour into, might just need to be custom made for you. God gets us right where we are. But it is this thing of, like Jesus, taking off the cloak of religion, taking off the cloak of influence, taking off the cloak of status, and just taking on the form of a servant and loving, getting low and intimate. How many of you have a foot thing? Like, it's like, please don't touch my feet. Or don't look at my feet. Or it's just like, some of us have a real problem with feet. Jesus has no problem with your feet. And he doesn't want us to have a problem with it either. Nicole and I went to a Jaja's house in Uganda, and we knew that we were planning to wash her feet. I don't know how that all came about, honestly. I just was like, yeah, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. I don't know if you guys talked about it or if it was just they heard the word of the Lord and said, we're going to wash Yuriana's feet today. But she had a dream that someone came to her house, a pastor, came to her house to wash her feet, and that she would be healed. And God sent me a Mazumba to her house to wash her feet. And then her little friend, she was so cute, Jaja Sarah. It might have been Ruth. It was Sarah. She showed up all dressed to the nines. Like, she was in her full, like, Ugandan regalia. And Nicole got to wash her feet. And this woman was beside herself with joy. And they sat there and wept and wept and wept. And then they rejoiced and rejoiced and rejoiced. And they wept some more that God would send somebody to wash their feet. And I've never felt more like Jesus in that moment. Nicole's a mess.